started, because let's face it, we all want to drink wine, right? I'm guessing that's why everybody's here, just to guess. Yeah, cool. I see thumbs. This is good. Awesome. So, welcome. We are trying a good selection of wines from Averill Creek Winery, which is going to be super exciting. So before we get stuck in, there's a couple of people I want to introduce. So myself, if you guys haven't seen me, most of you guys saw me today because you picked up all your wine samples. But my name's Christian, and I am here with Andrew, our owner, who's sitting and waving. And we're also here with Brent Rowland, who is the head winemaker from Averill Creek, who is also waving and saying hello. And our wine specialist and representative, Rich Massey, who is also sitting on mute and just saying hello to everybody. So over the course of the next hour or so, we're basically just gonna go through a little bit about Averill Creek, what makes them such a great winery, the journey that they've had so far. Brent's going to give us a little bit of a story about his history as a winemaker, and then we'll get stuck into the really important stuff. So during the chat, just a couple of like really simple housekeeping things. We love questions and comments. We absolutely love them, but it's really tricky to try and manage it with everybody on a microphone. So what we ask is if you do have any questions, would you mind writing them in the chat? And then both myself and Andrew are going to be going through the chat and fielding the questions and putting them forward to Brent. If there's anything particularly like back and forth that's a little bit more cumbersome, we'll take some people off mute and have a bit of a discussion. But for the most part, we'll try and keep it just a little bit less chaotic, which is what tends to happen when we have 18 people on a microphone at the same time. So if that works for everybody, that would be awesome. If you have any questions at any point during, pop them in the chat. We will be going through all of the questions as much as possible, and we'll give Brent a chance to actually answer some of the questions about the wines. So we have 5 wines to try, which is super exciting. And Brent actually had a hand in making all of these wines, which is part of the reason why we chose this selection, which is super fun. And we're going to get stuck into the fun stuff sooner or later. But for the moment, I'd like to introduce the actual winery, except I'm not the right person to do it. So Brent is the head winemaker for Averill Creek, and you've been the head winemaker there for a few years now, right? It's something that you sort of moved into quite recently, or is it a few years further back?
2018.
Nice. Okay, so a couple of years now.
Yeah.
So why don't, easiest way to do this, why don't you just give us an idea of Averill Creek as a winery, and the journey that you've had while you've been there?
Sure. Sorry, the dogs are wrestling in the background.
Straight away, first problem, dogs wrestling in the background. It doesn't sound like a bad thing.
Yeah, so Averill Creek was founded by Andy Johnston 20 years ago. I think it was a pretty bold move to clear 40 acres on the side of a mountain in Drunken Duncan and try to plant vinifera. So I call that kind of phase 1. He just kind of, I mean, he did his due diligence. He brought a geologist in, did soil samples, tried to figure out what would be best suited to the region. But it was a little bit of a, he had to hedge his bets a bit, I guess. So he just had to basically prove that you could grow quality grapes here. And he definitely did that. And now we're kind of into what I would call phase 2, which is, I mean, if you look at the emerging regions all over the world, the first thing an emerging region does is emulate. And we're an infant. Canada's an infant, let alone Vancouver Island. So the first thing the regions do is, oh, here's our Bordeaux blend, here's our Burgundian Chardonnay, here's our Alsatian Riesling. So what we're trying to do is it'll be a little bit more ostentatious and really kind of, for better or worse, define what wines from this area taste like. So instead of looking, oh, here's a Burgundy that looks like, or a Pinot that looks like Burgundy, but it's from the Cowichan Valley. No, we're not trying to copy anyone. So the way that I feel is the best way to do that, or we feel the best way to do that, is by doing as little as we can. So we don't add yeast, we don't add enzymes, we don't add nutrients, we don't filter, we don't fine. And the goal is to have the wines be the clearest segue from the vineyard to the glass. And then it's up to you to decide whether you like it or not. That's fine. But we're not I think wine is a sliding scale between a commodity and an art, and where you fit on that is up to you. So like an extreme would be, say, yellowtail. It's the exact same every year, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're making 300 million cases of it and they sell it out, and that's fine. But we're the other end of the spectrum. We're definitely more artisan. Our wines will be different every year. They're an expression of the site, and in that spirit, not everyone's going to love them, and that's fine. We're not. I think if everyone's your customer, no one's your customer. So we're putting our heart on our sleeves and really trying to define the area. So within that, that's how I kind of came in. My kind of journey to get here. In my 20s, I was a sommelier that, for probably firstly a surfer, that just traveled the world, and the easiest job to get was be a sommelier or work in restaurants at night. So I could surf all day. And then as I kind of evolved through my 20s, I thought, okay, I wanted to get out of that and get more into production. So quit my job, sold my house, moved to Australia, went to the University of Adelaide and did the wine program down there. And then after I graduated, I've now done 21 international harvests kind of all over the world.
Okay, yeah, so just a couple.
Just a couple. But it was really important, like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay is my jam, but I didn't just want to go to Burgundy and learn a recipe. I wanted to go to producers that I thought took the Burgundian winemaking ethos or spirit and were able to adapt it to their region. So I learned problem-solving skills instead of answers, because the goal was to always bring all of that information back, because I'm from the West Coast, bring it back here and really kind of define the area. So that's where we're at now. It's a really exciting, innovative, pioneering spirit. And it's a lot of fun. And I think the wines kind of show that. There's a lot of energy in them. There's a lot of creativity in the wines. And I think that's the exciting part of where we're at. So we've just kind of started, well, we haven't just started the journey, but really we have in the context of a winery.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the winery itself has been around for nearly 20 years, you said, right? But you've been not introducing, but you've been bringing your own experience in the last 2 or 3.
Yeah, I've done the last 3 vintages. Yep.
Nice. I've already got a question actually. So Anna's just asked, maybe just a little bit more for us novices. Burgundian winemaking ethos. So that what you were talking about that sort of like the style of making wine. Without going like insanely crazy, because I know we're all very thirsty.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
I suppose the clearest, I call it neoclassical winemaking. So what I'm doing is what they did 300 years ago, but I'm using the tools that we have now to inform my decisions. So 300 years ago, they just did it because their dad told them to do it. And that's what they've always done. So I'm doing that, but now I have the luxury of science. Mm-hmm. But instead of using science to like a commercial winery, they have big laboratories and they use science to be invasive and ameliorate and change the wine so that it comes out as one certain thing. So they have a destination and they make all their choices so the wine tastes like that. I don't want the wine to taste like anything. I just let it flow and give a little tap here and a little tap there, but I really allow it to express itself. But I suppose the Burgundian part of it comes in is the old world style of, I don't add anything. I don't add yeast. I don't add enzymes. I don't add nutrients. I don't filter. I don't fine. And if I can get away with sulfur free, which all the Joue wines in front of you are, I do. Mm-hmm. But I'm pragmatic, not dogmatic. At the end of the day, the wines have to give pleasure. So yes. I have no problem doing something if I have to, but I'm only doing this not to be like part of the cool kid natural wine scene. I'm doing it, I think it just makes better wine. And
it's very much a cool kid scene at the moment though too, isn't it?
Indeed it is. Indeed it is.
Yeah.
And I want to stay far away from that because that's not what I'm doing. This isn't a gimmick. It's not a marketing tool. The only reason I'm doing it is because it makes better wine, and I'm a hedonist, so the wines have to be pleasurable.
See? Well, I mean, if anybody can think of a better reason to make wine, I'd love to hear it. But, well, that makes a lot more sense now, because I was kind of wondering what Burgundian winemaking ethos was too. So that answers my question. So I think nobody's saying anything, but I know everybody wants to start trying the wine. So if everybody at home wants to grab, if they haven't already, grab the sample labeled number 1, because that's the first wine we're going to be trying. Number 1 is the Joue Field White, which Brent actually has on in front of his camera right now. So that's the bottle that all your wine came from, but you can't see it right now because you have sample bottles. But Brent, why don't you tell us a little bit about, like, honestly, just about this wine. I've tried it a couple of times. I've bought a couple of bottles, but we won't talk about that. What do you tell us just a little bit about it? So it's the only thing that we know at the moment is it's Joue, which is correct me if I'm wrong, but the line of wine that you have, the 3 wines, and that it's a field blend white. That's all we really know. So tell us a little bit about it.
All right. So when I came into Averill Creek, like I was alluding to before, I mean, Andy had to hedge his bets a bit. He was pretty confident that Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris would be the noble varieties, but he had to be like, oh, I got to run a business. So what if I'm wrong? Let's punch a little of this and a little of that. So when I came on board, there would be like, one every year, there might be 100 cases of this. And if this got ripe, there'd be 100 cases of that. So when I came on board, I thought, okay, I had 20 years of a cluster of data points. And I'm like, how can we take this information and focus the portfolio? So what I did was I created the Joue line, which literally means play in French. And that's what it is. The Joue line is basically a way for me to get rid of all of my creative anxiety. So every year it will change. Every year will be different. It's very experimental and hopefully innovative and pleasurable. And I want them to be the spirit of the Joue is to be consumed with libation and food and a giant table with lots of friends. I don't want you to think about them too much, but if you do want to think about them, there's stuff there to think about. And so that's the spirit of the Joue. Every year they will change. That's why I'm calling them a field blend for a couple reasons. One, because I want you to try them first, because I think we innately in the new world, we're really fixated on varieties and what that's supposed to taste like. But we don't know what wines are supposed to taste like on Vancouver Island. So I want you to try them first, hopefully, and then okay, what do I think about this before? Well, this is supposed to taste like that, and it doesn't taste like what it's supposed to taste like. Well, we don't know. So that's the spirit of these. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's kind of interesting, because now I'm really curious what everybody actually does think about the wine, because now I think nearly everybody's had a sip. I can see lots of glasses moving and stuff like that. So maybe I would love to hear what you guys are actually thinking about this wine before Brent goes through and tells us what it's supposed to taste like, because I don't know about you guys, but I personally need someone to tell me what wine is supposed to taste like, and then I can taste it. One of those things. But I'd love to know what you guys are thinking. So if anybody has any ideas about what they're getting out of this wine, if you want to pop them in the chat, we can sort of get a bit of an idea of what everybody's getting. I find it frighteningly easy to drink, is probably my 2 cents personally. Little bit flowery. Debbie says green apple. We're getting lots of the lighter sort of fruity, slightly flowery notes. What do you think about that, Brent? Do you think that hits the nail on the head?
Spot on.
Yeah.
Absolutely spot on.
It's hard to argue with, isn't it?
No, it's brilliant. And that's the spirit of these wines is consumability, but they're not pedestrian. I don't want them to be overly fruity or flabby or unctuous. I want them to be more. So when you're done, I want you salivating so that you want another sip or another bite of wine. And everyone should be salivating after they have a sip of this wine, which I know you are.
Okay, so everybody's thinking, yes, I want another sip of wine. Is that basically where all of our heads are at?
And this one the production on it is quite interesting. So the fruit came in, nothing's been added to it. I foot stomped it into half-ton bins and left it overnight. And what that does for me is it releases, not getting too technical, but it releases a compound called glutamate, which is umami. So that's where you're getting a bit of that salinity and that savoriness to counterweight all of that fresh fruit. So it's not just a blousy, flabby wine. It's got some tightness and some firmness to it. So that it is pleasurable and juicy and fruity, but it's not unctuous and clawing. And then it also, leaving it on skins like that, because this is, I will tell you the blend now, it's 40% Gewurz, 40% Gris, and 20% Chardonnay. but Gewürztraminer has a bad rap because it tends to be a really like canned lychees and very overtly fruity. So with this, by leaving it on the skins, you're releasing what's called phenolic compounds. And that's why you're getting what I love in this is that white flower potpourri and that jasmine tea and that really sort of pretty, elegant aromatics instead of big, blousy, fruity aromatics.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's definitely gives it a little bit more of it turns it less into I guess one of those like super sweet, super fruity, I'm 16, but I shouldn't be drinking kind of wines, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, if anybody's got any ideas about what else they're tasting or how they feel about it, that would be really interesting. Debbie said that she would have guessed Gewürztraminer, just because you don't get the stereotypical super, it's almost sugary, right, that you tend to get from that style of grape.
And
which, I mean, I know
that's why I don't put it on the label.
Alcohol, sure, but just out of curiosity, is this one of the 0-0 ones?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so this is really interesting, actually. Anna's just popped into the chat and said that she got a hint of sulfur, but I'm inclined to disagree personally. Just,
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of compounds that allude to each other, so I don't think she's wrong. I think it's just your marker for a certain compound might be different. So probably what I'm thinking is like I'm extremely tactile, which is also why I like to have it on skin. So you get that sort of telky, almost like slightly bitter compound on your tongue on this, which alludes to like a developed sulfide component in the wine, but it's not sulfur because I haven't added any sulfur to this. It's completely sulfur free.
Yeah, which is really interesting because it's funny how these sorts of tastes can come out even though there's no actual additives in there.
But you do get, I mean, sulfur tends to be burnt match, that kind of end of the flavor spectrum. And this, I would think, is in there. So I don't think that's a crazy comment at all.
Yeah. Well, it's actually really interesting because now it's coming out and we're sort of seeing that like it's not so much in the taste, it's more sort of the scent that you're getting. So you get it sort of in your nose rather than on the taste buds.
Mm-hmm. And I think especially because a lot of white wines of these varieties and even in this genre and price point tend to be so overtly fruity that something like this seems to be healthy and matchsticky.
Yeah, oh, definitely. So I see everybody's clearly very much enjoying it, but also I have a feeling that we might be tempted to move on to the next wine and keep trying some things because that's always, I feel like whenever I say, let's try the next wine, everybody gets excited. So why don't we jump on to wine number 2?
Sure.
So if everybody wants to grab their samples and yes, drain your glasses, of course, absolutely. Don't leave half full glasses. That's just ridiculous. And we'll move on to wine number 2, which is the Pinot. You're going to have to correct on how I say this, Brent, because I think is it Somenos?
Yes, that's right.
Somenos Pinot Gris.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this one's going to be really interesting. I personally haven't tried this either. I'm really excited to. We actually got this one in specifically for the wine tasting, so I'm super excited to see how it goes. But I'll also have to get everybody else's opinion on what's going on with this. But we actually specifically picked this wine because it was a Pinot Gris that Brent himself made, as opposed to some of the other vintages which were maybe released before Brent came on board with Averill Creek. So Brent, like Pinot Gris, right? It's a classic. Everybody knows what a Pinot Gris is, but at the same time, nobody really knows how to describe it. What would you say?
Well, I would say this is probably the wine that I'm most excited about in the entire portfolio. Not because I think
okay, that's a big call.
The best wine, I think, they're all my kids. I love them equally, but
but I have my favorite. Sure.
Yeah. No, but in the context of what I was talking about before, about how I'm not trying to emulate or really trying to define what wines from here taste like, this is the most unique expression of Pinot Gris I've seen on the planet. So it's not going to be. I would challenge anyone to pick this Pinot Gris wine. Jancis Robinson, good luck. But this to me alludes more to like a dry Loire Chenin or a cool climate Chardonnay or something from Chablis, sort of in that spectrum. And I think it's a very exciting proposal, and I've been really, really loving playing with this variety on Vancouver Island. So again, nothing's added except for a dusting of sulfur at the end. Foot stomped, but a lot more time on skins. And really, and this is now spent, this spends 12 months in oak, 10 months in oak. And then it gets bottled. So it has a lot more depth, a lot more complexity. I actually want 20% botrytis, which is a kind of a rot, which a lot of winemakers will shy away from. But I think, again, it builds depth and complexity to this wine. So it has a lot of texture, a lot of structure. It's probably our, you could have this with steak if you wanted to. I think it's a very, it's what what we do. And that's the thing too, which I try to really focus on is cool climate regions and producers tend to be a little bit like a short guy, younger brother complex, where it's like, look, we can make a big wine too. And they try to do something that they're compensate for what they don't do well instead of embracing what they do well. So that's what I'm doing. I'm like, no, I'm going to focus on, I'm going to let the Okanagan do big, rich, blousy Pinot Gris, because they'll do way better than us every day. But what we can do,
hard not to with the climate, right?
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want that, go to the Okanagan. But what we can do better than them, they'll never get the tension, the poise, the nuance, and the restraint that we get in these wines, which I think are more food orientated.
Okay. Yeah. Is that, is there, I just want to actually sort of come back for a second. You mentioned something, I missed the word, I'm sorry, but you said 20% something, and you said winemakers tend to shy away from it.
Oh, botrytis.
Botrytis, right. Is there a reason that most winemakers tend to steer away from something like that?
It doesn't look good. It's rot.
Right. Okay. So it's very much the stigma of having that aspect of winemaking involved.
Yeah. And when you talked before about the Burgundian ethos, that's precisely it. So if you go to Bordeaux, what they do is they're trying to make perfect wines. What they do in Burgundy is Bordeaux's trying to find perfection. Burgundy's trying to find perfection in imperfection. So
okay, that's a poetic way of putting it, I think.
Yeah. So je ne sais quoi is beautiful.
Yeah,
like those wines that are perfect, that's like, I call them cosmopolitan magazine wines. They've been airbrushed. There's no cellulite or wrinkles, but that's not beautiful. I like cellulite. I like wrinkles. I think that je ne sais quoi makes a wine beautiful.
I really like how you can word that, actually. I have a couple of questions. I have one that I'd like to ask about this wine specifically, and then I might ask the following one while we're pouring the next wine. So the first one is specific to this Pinot Gris, and it was a very, very niche question from Karen. What type of oak do you actually use for the barrels?
All French and all old.
All French and all old. Okay, I have to ask, like, why?
Why? Because
just very briefly.
I'm not looking for a oak flavor in the wine. Again, that's makeup to me. But what I'm looking for is the influence that the vessel has on the flavors of the wine. So the mid-palate density and the texture and the sort of surface area to volume ratio to the lees, which is what settles out to the bottom. So it's less about the flavor of the oak and more about the impact of the vessel on the wine itself.
Right. Okay. So that makes like a big part of the decision-making process, obviously.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, cool. I do have one more question, but what I might do is get everybody onto pouring their third wine, which is clearly labeled number 3. It's the Rosé. But while everybody's just getting set up with that, it's only recently that I learned the answer to this question, and I'm sure it's probably a 50-50 split between the people who know the answer and the people who don't. But I think, Brent, you're the perfect person to give a clear explanation of this. What is the purpose of adding the sulfur to the wine?
Sulfur is a great tool for a winemaker because
absolutely.
What it does is it's a poison. So there's a lot of microbial activity in wine. So when you add sulfur as a winemaker, you can be tasting it through its evolution or élevage. And when you're like, okay, this is where I want it, you put sulfur in, it kills everything and locks that flavor in.
Right.
But you're drinking a dead product. The wine is dead. So by not adding sulfur, there's all this microbial activity in the wine. And what it does is, and you will see when you buy bottles of these wines, which I hopefully you all do, it's different. it's like kombucha because there's all this microbial activity. It aids digestion. You feel like you need to have it with food and it helps digest, and they change and they evolve and they're their own spirit. So it's sulfur just kills everything and you're drinking a dead product.
Well, I mean, like, I totally get
I'm being dramatic to
like, yeah. I just want to like, I try and like make sure that everybody's clear that like the tiniest bit of sulfur does not make a bad wine, right? Like it's a tool. Like it's probably the tool that winemakers use above most other things.
It creates stability, and like I said, I'm pragmatic, not dogmatic. If the wines, so what I do is I put the wines in a glass like this and on the bench in my lab, and I leave it for 3 weeks. And if they grow microbial, I'll add sulfur because you have to. It has to be, again, give pleasure. So that's where it comes into place. You have to knock back. But if it's stable after 2 or 3 weeks in a glass, I don't need to add sulfur.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it creates that sort of the wine that's not going to dramatically change or literally grow. Realistically, is the actual word, right?
Yeah.
So just a quick follow-up question, just to sort of clarify. Does that realistically mean that when you add sulfur, the wine doesn't age, or is it a little bit more fine-tuned than that?
Well, it definitely ages slower, and it is almost like
linear
a scale. Like the more sulfur you add, it's a preservative, so it's going to preserve the wine for longer.
Yep.
So, for example, the next wines that we'll try, all the Joue are sulfur-free, but the other ones, they have about 25 parts of sulfur added.
Yep.
Where you can add legally, you can add 300 parts.
Yes.
But you have,
for anybody who's listening, this is 300 parts per million.
Sorry, guys. Yes.
No, that's fine. It's just to be sort of super clear. So like in natural wine, you see what's a stereotypical number? 10, 20?
Yeah, I think to be under the definition, it's less than 50, but that's
less than 50. Okay, cool. Whereas legally, you can do up to, sorry, what was it? 350?
300.
I know it changes from region to region, country to country, but long story short, like if you're not making natural wine, the chances that you're adding up to 10 times more sulfur is relatively high, right?
And it's a preservative, so it does hold it and keep it longer.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I mean, I'm definitely not arguing that it definitely has its purpose in winemaking, but I guess it's just a contention point from, especially in the world of like natural winemaking versus the more conventional style.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the luxury of working here. In cool climates, your acids are lower, and when acids are lower, your stability is greater. So if you're in California and your pH is 4, you have to have sulfur because there's a lot more activity. Here, not much grows at a pH of 3.2, which is a lower acid, which is what happens in a cool climate. So we have the luxury. I don't need to add sulfur because the acid does the job for me.
It's a win. Debbie's just said that this one pairs very nicely with popcorn. For anybody who is wondering, and for anybody who has popcorn at home, apparently this one works very nicely. Just out of curiosity, is there any other notes about the rosé apart from we have it with popcorn? Just out of curiosity. Not that I think that's a bad point, but I'd love to know a little bit more about it. So Brent's got the bottle, which is the Joue Rosé. So is this one just what everybody's tasting, and everybody hopefully in the next couple of seconds is going to be telling me what they think about it. But in the meantime, is this another blend of grapes?
Oh yeah, this is every grape on the property.
Okay, cool. This is good to know. So I won't make you write a list.
Yeah,
it
is almost irrelevant.
The white, right? Designed to be super approachable, super easy to drink.
Yeah. So what the spirit of this wine, how I thought of it, making this wine is that, I love rosé, but I was getting kind of not sick of, I would say bored of the thin tomato water Provence rosés. I like them because they're dry, but I wanted a rosé that had presence and flavor and intensity, but still bone dry. And so that's why I wanted this to be like, it's kind of like, to me, it's like even the label represents a little like a biker rosé or like a rock star kick rosé. It's like a intense rosé with a lot of flavor and vibrancy and presence, but it's not sugary and flabby.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to get a ridiculous, thank you. It's very easy to get like a ridiculously sweet or a ridiculously dry rosé. You just sort of, I guess you get the two extremes. I've got loads of questions about the rosé. People are loving the rosé, super interested. I'm gonna throw some questions at you pretty fast. First question, what would you say is the ideal consumption temperature for a rosé like this?
Well, this rosé kind of rides the line of red and white, so slightly chilled, but it doesn't have to be ice cold.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. Everybody's saying raspberry. What do you think about that? I get raspberry for sure. Also, like a little bit effervescent, just a fraction.
Yeah, fully, because I use that to preserve the wine. A little bit of dissolved CO2 in the wine instead of sulfur will also preserve it and give it some longevity. But definitely, to me, this has had a lot of skin contact, so you get that kind of dried. Now we're looking at rose petal potpourri and those kind of floral notes to counterweight the fruit instead of the white flower potpourri.
Yeah, which makes sense. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely like it's. I mean, I've been very recently getting much more used to the very like French style rosés, like ultra dry, but also like super light and not as much. I don't know. I guess not as much body as something like this.
Which is fine. This is just an alternative.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
No,
I love those. I love those wines too. And our Somenos Rosé, which will come out probably in the summer, is like that. It's a very light, more of that Provence style. But I mean, this is what I want to crush on a patio in the summer. And
oh yeah, this would be like dangerous on a sunny afternoon for
and
sure.
even like Rich says, actually, he said something about this wine which I quite like. This is also a winter rosé. So you can have this rosé in the winter because it's got a lot of presence, and you don't just need it to be light and floral on a patio.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. Winter rosé. I like the way that sounds. It's appropriate for I don't know this time of year in Vancouver.
John Snow would approve.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So Adele actually asked a really interesting question because you mentioned earlier that you're actually sort of almost hunting for that like more dry style without going over the top Provence style. Simple question, why?
Yeah, it's a simple. I'll try to keep the answer simple. So when I got to Averill Creek, there's a variety here called Marchal Foch, which I'd never worked with before. And when you taste this grape on the vine, it is so beautiful. It is. I was like, ugh, it's a hybrid, and like vinifera guys always kind of shun the hybrids. But trying this fruit off the vine, it was like fruit salad. It was so juicy, so fresh, so vibrant. And everyone, because it ripens early in cool climates, they plant it so that they can make a bigger style red. And I'm like, nope, we're not doing that anymore. This screams to be made into like a rosé, or when we try the Joue red, it's just like fruit salad. But the juice of itself is quite dark. So I needed to find a way to make it fresher. So it's actually co-fermented with white berries and red juice.
Oh, is there any particular, just out of curiosity, is there a particular white grape that's more dominant in that mix?
No, this is a third. Oh no, actually no, that's wrong. 2/3 Gris and 1/3 Gewurz this year.
For the rosé?
Yeah.
Right. So it's actually, I mean, obviously the Chardonnay.
Sorry. Of all of the white, 2/3 of it is Gris and 1/3 is.
Oh, okay. So of the white,
1/3 white overall, but of that 1/3, 2/3 is Gris and 1/3 is Gewurz.
Oh, the math is going to drive everybody. What were the red grapes involved, or like the majority even?
Yeah, Marchal Foch, Pinot Noir, and Merlot.
Marchal Foch, Pinot Noir, and Merlot. Okay, cool. So there's a little bit of everything in there, right?
Yeah, everything.
Yeah. I mean, we've got every piece of the puzzle sort of all fitting together. So the aim of this one was patio season, I want to say.
No, the aim was to actually it was to create this style of rosé here, and I think it's to kind of recalibrate people's expectation of rosé. It doesn't have to be just super sugar water and dark, or it doesn't have to be tomato water and Provence. You can have a new expression of it and still be. I think this is, again, one of our most versatile pairing wines. Little Ronnie's barbecue and Tofino just picked it up. I'm like, perfect. Thank you.
I was about to ask, like, if you could pick absolutely any meal to put with this, what would it be?
Yeah, this and barbecue is great, I think.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, you're speaking to the Australian in me.
Yeah.
Well, I am sold personally. I think everybody else is too, because everybody's, I think, pretty close to emptied their glasses by the look of it. So I guess, oh, sorry, I do have one question from Louise. Louise is grinning cheerfully in the camera. Yes, we can see you, Louise. I might need a little bit of clarification on specifically what aspect you were looking for, but the question was actually just how is it made?
Okay. So I think I invented a new way to make rosé.
Whoa. Okay. All right. Hold up. Just, yeah, go on.
I didn't want to get into it because I'm trying to keep this like.
Well, I tell you what, let's do a deal. If everybody wants to grab sample number 4 and start getting that organized, and in the meantime, Brent, how did you invent a new style of rosé?
Yeah. So classically, there's 3 ways that you generally make rosé. There's what's called saignée, which means to bleed in French, and you have a tank of red fruit, and you're trying to concentrate it. So you're trying to increase the skin to juice ratio. So you bleed off, say 5% of the juice,
Right.
and then you don't waste that. You just make rosé out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Or you blend red and white, which is very easy. Or you take red fruit. So the difference between red wine and white wine is white wine, you press the fruit right away and you ferment just the juice. Red wine, you ferment it on the skins and everything, and once it's fermented, then you press it. Mm. So with other rosé, which is the most common type of rosé, you take the red fruit, you put it in the press, you press it, and then you ferment it like a white wine.
Yes, right.
Depending on the amount of
like pinky texture.
Yeah, and the amount of time on skins will determine the amount of color in the.
Oh, I like skin contact is very accurate, but it's such a buzzword in winemaking.
Yeah. So what I did with this, and rosé tends to as well, for whatever reason, be an afterthought wine. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, we don't want to do that, just put it in the rosé. Just put it in the rosé. So this is the difference with this is this was meant to be rosé from the beginning, and I respected the wine itself. So I put red fruit, came into the winery, I put it into the press on the champagne cycle, pressed it off into an open top red fermenter, and then I added whole berry white grapes on top, and then treated it like a red ferment. So I would punch it down once or twice a day based on taste, let it ferment, and then once it was dry, then I pressed it off. So it's kind of like a combination between a red wine, a white wine, and an orange wine.
And it just turns out to be rosé.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's do you know of it, like, just out of curiosity more than anything else, do you know of anybody else who's like even done something similar?
No. And I'm not saying it's profound or I'm like a genius.
Oh no, like it's
kind of luck.
It was actually super exciting, but there's a million of them, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm sure it's been done somewhere else. I've just never heard of it. But it was literally because the juice of the Marshall Foch is so dark. I'm like, how do I like tone it down a bit?
Yeah.
And so then the first trial was literally a 200-liter little vessel. And well, try, and if it doesn't work, I'll just blend it away. And then during harvest, we had like 3 or 4 cellar hands, and everyone was always going to that tank at the end of the day to I'm like, all right, I'm all in. Let's do 600 cases.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So 0 to 100.
I called Rich. I'm like, hey man, I'm gonna make 600 cases of a freaky deaky rosé. Do you think you can sell it?
Okay, I'm gonna unmute Rich for a second because Rich, do you want to pop yourself off mute for a second? Because I really want to know how you managed to pull that one off. I've still got, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
You can hear me. How did I manage to pull what off? Well, I don't know if we sold it all. Yeah, it's selling. It's doing really good. I think yeah, this wine just like fits a particular market of people that are looking for interesting and unique wines that make them think a little bit more from like the traditional stuff that they've been drinking for the last 20 or 30 or 40 years. So this fit that mold really well and really easily. So I live on where I'm sitting right now. I'm on Main and First Avenue. So most of the restaurants that I work with that I go around, like I did this afternoon, are all like little independent restaurants on Main Street or in Gastown that have a little bit more of that like minimal intervention wine program. And so if you bring something a little bit interesting and unique like this, especially it's from Vancouver Island, something hyper local to where we are, because there's a lot of localism right now within the market, everybody trying to support everybody else, especially small family farms or local restaurants that are owned independently. Everybody wants to like lean into that, and then to bring something that can stand up on the world stage with like this minimal intervention approach to like winemaking, stuff like that. It's actually gone really well. And the entire Joue project is, like, if you're talking about it on social media, the hashtag is like pound product Joue. It's been fantastic. We've got some. Another thing that I think is really interesting about it is that I can sell it to like Juice Bar in Gastown, but then also St. Lawrence has it on by the glass. So two completely like diametrically like opposed style of like where they're at, it still works for both those genres of like restaurants or stores or what have you. Yeah.
No, 100%. I mean, the whole, especially that idea of being able to find wines like this that are nearby. I mean, like Brent, which is actually the one that connected us at Winston with Averill Creek and Brent. So I mean, that was the exact mentality that we had going in as well. Is like, if we can find wineries that are local that we can support, that also have this ethos of the natural winemaking process, and bringing these like really high quality but also minimal intervention wines.
Yeah,
so we're in. We're sold. We're already sold.
Yeah, totally. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. If this was a wine and I was importing this, say, from like a hot producer from Sicily and was at this like quality, or even from Burgenland in like Austria or something, this would be easily like a $40 or $50 or $60 bottle of wine. So to have this quality of winemaking and be able to get it for like $30 at a store is like that's where the value of British Columbia comes in, when you have people like Brent making the wines and like pushing and leaning into like this style of winemaking.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this, just to like very cheekily segue into the next wine, this style of winemaking is actually like the next wine that you guys are trying is actually the Joue Field Red, which I can see everybody's already onto it. Some people have already had a chance to finish their glasses, which is great. Very exciting. So this is the third wine in the Joue line, which Brent has nice and happy in his camera right now. Rich, I'm just going to pop you on mute again, but if you have anything you'd like to pop in, please just unmute yourself when you're ready.
That's it?
Yeah, sure. Why not? But the Joue Field Red is it's the third wine in the line of Joue wine. So it's following the same mentality that the white and the rosé was sort of working towards. This one, Brent, what's the blend on this one? I didn't have a chance to actually have a look before we jumped on.
I'll tell you after.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so there's some curiosity here. Okay, let's take some votes. What do we think this wine is like? Like, what are we getting out of this? Are we getting floral notes? Are we getting like earthy notes? Are we getting this? Are we getting that? I love just throwing out random wine buzzwords and seeing what resonates with people, if anybody can't tell. Cool. Okay, there's a vote for Cab Franc.
Good call, buddy.
Which is, yeah, okay, I could see that.
Like a glue from Noir.
Dark cherry and pomegranate. Sorry, Brent, I missed that little bit that you said just before.
Oh no, I think that it alludes to like one of those, what they call glue in French, the really like drinkable.
I gotta say, I love the expression glue.
Yeah. Well, you're Australian.
It's so perfect. Before we explain it, just hands up in the camera. Who knows what glue is? Literally almost nobody. Wow, almost nobody. So how do you even explain it? So it's a French term to describe a wine, and I don't even know the best way to describe it. What would you say, Brent?
It translates literally into glug glug.
Yeah,
So
it's
glug 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 glug.
glug 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 glug. Like you just want to keep drinking it. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. It is a French term for a wine that you just want to keep drinking, keep sipping on, keep enjoying, keep, you know, sitting out on the patio or sitting at home with a meal or a movie or whatever you feel like. But I think this one is definitely one of those wines. So there's a few people actually just mentioning notes that they found about this wine. So we've got Cab Franc potentially, talk of dark cherry or pomegranate, ash, slightly earthy, taste like terroir. I always struggle with that word. What would you say now that everybody's had a chance to actually try it and we've had a few votes on what the tasting notes are, Brent? What would you say now?
Mate, I'm very impressed with everyone. They've nailed.
I mean, these guys have a palate, right?
They do. I'm blown away. This, like, every time that there hasn't been one, I'm like, ugh, that's wrong. Like, spot
if
on.
anybody's going to say anything wrong, it's going to be me, just so you know.
Yeah. Well, you have, but they haven't.
Yeah.
No, I think it's brilliant. They're all very astute tasting notes, I think. So this wine was the first original Joue. So when I came to Averill Creek, it was Andy's a very unique man, and our philosophies differed quite a bit on paper. So I wasn't sure if I was gonna last at Averill Creek. It was like, okay, he hired me, and I said, look, I can't make you a wine. I can only make the wines that I know how to make. So if you hire me, you're hiring someone. You're not hiring someone to make you this style of wine or that style of wine. You're hiring someone that is going to come on board and do what I feel, because I feel like a winemaker's job is to, like, taste the fruit, understand where it's going, and help it on its journey, not to like force a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, after that was in the interview, and then I brought on board, and after we got talking, I'm like, okay, well, I don't think this is going to work out. He was anti whole bunch, anti wild yeast, and anti a few of the things that I was really passionate about. But then I thought, my name's on these wines. Either I'm going to go all in, and either he's going to fire me or hire me. So I just went for it.
Bold mentality. I'll give you that one.
Yeah. Well, I'm a gypsy, so it's fine. If I didn't, I'd just move somewhere else, and I'd be fine. So
move somewhere else, make wine somewhere else.
Yeah, back down to Australia.
Well, I have follow-up questions for you later. But that's it's very cool that you've had a chance to bring this quite literally international experience to this winery, right? That's not something that every winery gets to boast.
And I think that's a great segue, because this wine is the clearest example of that. So what the production on this wine was, the fruit came in, and again, it's Marshall Foch. Now that you've all tried it, whatever. Marshall Foch and Pinot Noir. Actually, this one's 90% Marshall Foch. Oh, sorry, this one's 60% Marshall Foch, 40% Pinot Noir. But the fruit came in, and I'm tasting this juicy fruit. I'm like, I'm not making a Bordeaux blend out of it. To me, this is more like Blaufränkisch from Austria, or Gamay, or like a Glou from Loire. So the fruit came in. I did 100% whole bunch. A fermentation technique, which is, let's call it semi-carbonic maceration, which tends to promote a lot of carbonic maceration, is Beaujolais Nouveau. So it's a super fruity sort of pedestrian wine. I wanted that generosity of fruit, but I didn't want it to be pedestrian. So I did sort of an element of that, but not all the way. So the fruit came in, whole bunches, into the fermenter, sealed it, left it for 2 weeks, didn't look at it, didn't touch it, pressed it off, and I was really happy with the fruit and the perfume, but I wanted more structure to the wine. So our top Pinot, our Somenos Pinot Noir, is very tannic. So when I was pressing it, I was tasting the press tray, and I cut it at about 3/4 of the way through the press cycle because it was getting too tannic. I'm rambling a bit, but it's going to come in at the end.
It's all right. If anybody was wondering, we all love wine here. So
yeah, okay. So then I dumped the skins and the leftovers, basically the marc of our top cuvee, the Somenos Pinot Noir, into bins, and I could still squeeze wine out of it. And this is our top wine. So I had the Joue in tank, which I'd already pressed, which needed more structure. This wine had too much structure. So I copied a technique. What they do is in Veneto in Italy called ripasso. So I put the Joue juice on top of the Pinot Noir skins, let it sit for 3 or 4 days and marinate, and then repressed it. And so not only did it give me more structure and texture to the wine, it gave me another layer of depth and complexity of the fruit and the perfume. But the spirit of this wine is definitely, it's almost I like that about the Joues is they dance in each other's genres. So the
yeah,
white,
definitely. Like you can taste that they're like clearly, I don't want to say the same wine because they're definitely not, but like they're clearly like related, right?
exactly. And I think they would all pair with a very similar food.
Okay, I have a question for you. It's a question that Karen asked me earlier, but I was trying to find the right moment to ask it. And I think the moment is right now, while just, quick side note, just while everybody is pouring wine number 5, this is when I'm going to ask this question. So we actually, as part of the samples that we sent to everybody who's joining us tonight, we included a small dish of hummus, and it's a beet flavored hummus specifically. So here's my question, and it's very, very specific. Without having tasted said hummus, which wine out of the 5 would you suggest would be the best pairing for a beet flavored hummus?
Either the rosé or the Joue red.
Okay.
Probably rosé first, and then try that. And if the hummus was a bit too big for the wine, then I'd go to the Joue red.
Yeah, I feel like the rosé would probably have been the better one. Because I have tried the hummus and it is beautiful, but it's definitely not. It's a really nice flavor, but it's not out of control. It was the chef actually created it for the purpose of wine tasting, so it's designed not to overpower wines.
Right.
And it works really well with it. So yeah, my vote would have been the rosé personally as well. So but I was just curious what you would have said, like with no background whatsoever, just like vague tasting notes. What do you think? Like
Depends
just
how much beet's in there. If it's a heavy beet, then probably more Joue red. If it's a little bit subdued on the beet, then probably the rosé.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, that gives you guys a little bit of an idea. I mean, my personal vote was the rosé. So, I mean, but like at the end of the day, it's hummus and wine. Like, can you really argue with it? I don't personally think so. Okay, cool. So we've got all of wine number 5 on the way. So wine number 5 was the Pinot Noir, which is very, very exciting. I have not even had a sip of it yet. This will be my very first sip on camera.
Oh, good.
But while everybody is telling us what they think of the Pinot Noir, Brent, what would you like to say about it? I mean, again, Pinot Noir, very much like Pinot Gris, it's one of those wines that everybody knows what it is, but also it's so diverse as a wine, right? Like literally the word, like the name Pinot Noir can mean just a whole range of widely tasting wines. So what would you say about yours?
Well, Pinot Noir is my passion, firstly.
Right.
So this is now we're stepping into a different proposal. I mean, it's still in the same spirit. So I'm still allowing the vineyard to speak and do all that, but I'm making wine with instinct, but I'm not recreating the wheel too much with this. This is Pinot Noir, and I'm respecting that it is Pinot Noir.
And straight away you get that actually, like even the smell, the aroma coming out of it.
And that's I feel that we'll always, in this climate, we will always produce better Pinot Noir than warm climates. Because if you're a Pinot Noir lover, which is why I never decant Pinot Noir, if you decant a wine, you will get it at its best, possibly, potentially. But the joy of Pinot Noir is the cerebral engagement and the evolution of the wine. So I want the first sip and the last sip to be completely different. And you won't get that in a warm climate because you just get a lot of ripe fruit. In cool climates, you get sort of these razor fine layers of complexity that are a lot of nuance that slowly release themselves over time instead of just like bleh. And so that's why I love Pinot, and that's why I think Pinot does better in climates like this over warmer climates. And this is, again, 100% whole bunch, because I believe that when you ferment, so traditionally you destem the grapes from the stems and you ferment just the grapes. But no, actually not traditionally, but conventionally.
Conventionally is a good word. Yeah, better word.
So this is, the whole bunch is just go into the ferment. And what that does is give you this beautiful perfume and these aromatics. And for me, Pinot is all about perfume. So when I have a wine that I'm smelling for 20 minutes, I'm like, oh shoot, I should probably take a sip. And usually means that's a great wine.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I admit, like, even myself trying this one, I sat there like just sitting there and sort of just smelling it for a minute before I realized that I should probably try it so that I can talk about it on camera. That's exactly what I got out of this wine.
And this is what Vancouver Island does. This is quintessential Vancouver Island Pinot. Perfume, poise, juiciness, freshness, vibrancy, intensity.
Yeah, no, definitely.
An incredible value. I don't know what.
It's beautiful. So like Pinot Noir is very much like you've said it, like this is your game, right? This is where your heart in winemaking truly lies. Is there like a reason for that? Did you have a background specifically? Like, did you come up in winemaking doing Pinot specifically, or like what was the reason that all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but like why is it that as soon as the word Pinot Noir comes up, you go, "Oh, let's go"?
There's a couple of reasons. I think again, because it is a very cerebral wine. It's engaging. It changes. It evolves. It challenges you to be constantly thinking about it as you're consuming it.
Right.
Like my favorite wines are the first sip and the last sip. I'm like, did I love it or hate it? I don't really know. So they challenge you to kind of step outside of your box a little bit and maybe think about what you're tasting and not just kind of, oh, well, this wine writer said it was 98 points, so I assume I like it. No, what do you think? And Pinot Noir will challenge you to think that. But then the you know how they always have those like wine moments, the wow moments. My first kind of love of wine ever was, I don't know where you're from in Australia, but there was this little wine bar in the basement of Bondi Beach, and they had had a Ninth Island Pinot Noir from Tasmania back in 2001. I was, I don't know, 20 years old, and I'm just like, this is wine, and I had never tasted a wine like that because I'd always had like, oh yeah, we'll buy, we don't cheap Cab Sav or whatever.
Wow, really?
And I'm like, this is a whole new. I didn't know that wine could be like that, so that started it. And I'm not saying that's a great wine, but for me at that time, it was a eye opener to what the potential of wine can be.
I mean, my first like exposure to the not just like a glass of wine, but the idea of wine was when someone actually put two glasses in front of me, and they gave me a Pinot Noir from two different regions, and there were two different regions in Australia. In fact, in the same state, or province. We call them states. And it was two different Pinot Noirs. Imagine having a Pinot Noir from the Okanagan and a Pinot Noir from Vancouver Island. That is essentially what someone did to me. And that was my first experience actually properly trying wine, like any wine at all. Before that, I sipped wine and gone, I don't like this. But someone gave me some two really nice Pinots from completely different regions. And they said, just try these, and this will give you an idea of like why wine is so interesting. And I did, and I was obsessed. Like just straight off the bat, I was like, it took me a little while to start loving wine, but the idea that I can have like the exact same grape from two different regions, and this one is spicy, but this one is fruity and sweet, was like mind blowing to me. So it's like, I get it.
Well,
The whole idea of Pinot being so versatile and so interesting is like crazy.
Well, that's Burgundy. Burgundy takes that to the next level, where vines can be touching almost, or you can throw a rock from one vine to the other, and the vine from that, the wine from that vine is $1,000 a bottle, and the wine from this vine is $50 a bottle.
Right.
And you can throw a rock between them. So that's how I don't want to say malleable, because that's the wrong adjective, but
Diverse,
how
maybe.
expressive Pinot
That's
Noir
better.
as a plant can be, depending on what you do with it.
Yeah,
What
no,
the
it's
soil
such
is
an
in,
interesting. I mean, wine in general has like just captured my attention for how interesting it is. But Pinot Noir specifically is just an interesting area, because I can't believe there's so much versatility in an area where literally everything is called Pinot Noir. I did have a question come through, which is really interesting, dedicated to this Pinot. If you were tempted to age the wine, what would you say the appropriate amount of time would be?
So I'll give you like my blanket statement for wines
Mhm.
that are built to age. Is I think you should consume a wine within 5 years or after 10, because there's something
Interesting way of thinking about it.
very intoxicating about a wine in its youth. There's a lot of freshness, a lot of vibrancy, a lot of fruit, a lot of generosity, and I find that quite intriguing. And then after 10 years, as a general rule of thumb, they
Mhm.
start to get what's called secondary development. So you get cigar box and tar and leather and depth. And then between 5 and 10, they're kind of like an awkward teenager. They're kind of like neither one or the other. So
I like that. I say the same thing about our coffee sometimes. It's just like it's an awkward teenager that doesn't want to behave. No, that's a really good way of describing it. Okay, so I like that. So if you're going to enjoy it in the next few years, then enjoy it and enjoy it for what it is. And if you're going to age it, like take the time to do it properly.
yes, either piss or get off the pot. Do one or
That's a very Australian thing to say of you. You picked that up somewhere. Just out of curiosity, there was a not so much a question as a comment in the chat. Prince Edward County, a Pinot Noir from that region. Someone mentioned that it's possibly similar in a sort of palate to that sort of area. Have you tried that sort of area before, or do you know much about it?
I came from Niagara. I worked at Pro
Oh, perfect. That's a fantastic question then.
Yeah, and I like what they're alluding to is the acid core, and how it's a cool climate region that's very acid driven. But the thing about acid, which separates sort of the good producers from the bad producers, is it's not quantifiable acid. It's the texture of the acid. So you can't just like add acid out of a bag and see, oh, it's high acid, but it's
and slap a number on it and call it a day, right?
Yeah, it has to be presented well. It can't be angular and crunchy and sour, and that's what cool climates do. When you've got cold shoulder seasons like we do, like the spring and the fall, you can let your fruit hang, and the acids don't fall away, but they change their makeup and they soften, and the texture of the acid is what's important. So yes, Prince Edward County has a very similar acid profile to our.
So that's what you tend to pick up on when you find the similarities in the wines.
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Awesome. Well, we have managed to try 5 wines, which is awesome. I'm going to give, just out of, like, if anybody has any questions or comments or anything like that for myself or for Rich or for Brent or for anybody who's on this chat right now, now is definitely the time to pop them in the chat so we can make sure that we get to everybody's questions, make sure that we're not missing any information that anybody's interested in. But otherwise, this is, I almost feel guilty asking this question, Brent. Out of the 5, do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite child? It's not an easy question. I know this.
No, it really isn't. And you know what? I will say that it's probably, again, because of the way that the wines are made, and because they are alive, and because they do evolve and change slightly, I float between them all.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah.
I mean, the Pinot Noir is
close to heart, right? Like you can't help it.
But it's almost obvious. That's it's a great, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I kind of like, well,
100%.
it's
Be
like,
proud of what you've made. Like,
that's
there's no
like
shame
saying
in
Wayne
that.
Gretzky's your favorite. You know, there's nothing creative about saying this is my favorite wine because it's an obvious one. But the other ones, I think a little bit more of my soul went into them because there's a lot more creativity and innovation, and so they're kind of, even though, so this is the child that became a doctor, and sure, I love him, but the other ones are like punk rock stars and musicians, and so even though they're poor and I have to pay their rent, I still love them.
That is one of the better ways I have heard a winemaker describe their wine, I have to say. Definitely. I love it. I love it so much. I think I don't know if I can go past that Pinot either. I've got to say, like, I mean, I do love Pinot. Obviously, I don't know if I have the same passion as you do because I didn't make it. But I've always loved Pinot Noir. I always have, and I do love this one. It's easy to drink. It's got a little bit of complexity. Like, it's interesting, but it's not like, out of the league of someone who realistically, like me, who does love wine but is still learning about them. It's got enough going on there that I can really enjoy it and appreciate it without being like, oh, I don't really know what's going on here anymore.
And all of the wines, I hope, I mean, it's like I said, like I like to enjoy wines, and I want the wines to challenge you a bit but not be challenging.
Yeah.
So I want you to like, huh, a little bit, but I don't want you to like, I can't have that every night. Like I want them to maybe push the boundaries in a sense that they're maybe a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but I don't want them to be esoteric just to be esoteric. And then it's the emperor's new clothes and you're afraid to say that you don't like it or you don't sound cool. I want you to enjoy every wine, but just be a little bit challenged.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know about everybody else here. I can't speak for them, but I think from my point of view, these wines definitely hit the nail on the head here. I do have one question. If anybody else has any questions they would like to ask Brent or anybody else, please, now is the time to do it. But one question which is really interesting, Anna actually mentioned, because this winter's been quite mild, like as a winter season, I know that it's obviously going to change the next vintage, right? And you said yourself that every year these wines are going to be changing. How is the climate that has happened this year, this mild winter, how's that going to affect the wines that you're going to be creating in the next year or two?
It won't much.
Really?
Won't. No,
wow.
No.
Okay, because like, I mean, in my head, like climate is, well, I mean, I'm not going to say 90%, but it's a lot, right?
Yeah,
So
it's not when the vine is dormant.
Oh, okay.
The vine so right now the vines are asleep. They're like a hibernating bear. So what it will affect is, the big thing for us is soil temperature, to be honest. So when the soil warms up, the vines warm up. So it does affect as well. Like there's a correlation between air temperature and soil temperature. But if
they're not exactly the same.
No, but if we continue to have this sort of mild weather into spring, the soil temperature will warm up faster and the vines will awaken quicker. And then they'll ripen quicker.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. But like when you say it out loud, it like makes it a little bit easier to visualize realistically. So does that mean that it's not so much? I mean, I'm following on from this question, right? So mild winters or intense winters, they make a subtle difference, but not a ridiculous difference. Is that more or less it?
They have, yeah.
I know I'm oversimplifying. I totally understand.
You're absolutely not, but it's basically the winter season. That's why Prince Edward County, they bury their vines because it's so cold.
Right. To keep them in the soil where the temperature is a little more stable.
Because they can get to minus 25 in the winter. But then they can still produce wines that are a very similar profile to what we produce here, which is a very mild winter. So it's more about the growing season than the dormant season.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like we've managed to try 5 very, very nice wines. And now I think everybody is either finished their wines or needs to go and finish their wines. If you haven't finished your wines, go and finish your wines.
Oh, hey, one thing I did want to say.
Oh yeah, please.
This wine isn't even released. So if you guys have it in your liquor store or your wine shop.
Is that the Pinot Noir? Sorry, your camera's a little bit bright.
The Pinot Gris.
Oh, the Pinot Gris, which is number 2. Pinot Gris was number 2, guys.
Yeah.
So that wine hasn't actually been released yet.
No, so
well, okay. That one hasn't been released yet, but I know of a place somewhere in North Vancouver that has a case of it.
And I guarantee you, when we do release it, it's almost sold out already. So it's going to be like sold out extremely fast. So if you like it.
I can confidently tell you guys right now, I have 8 bottles, and that is all.
No, Courtney,
that apparently is short supply. So just subtle hint for you guys. I'm just saying. Oh no, I would never jack the price of the wine just because it's a little bit harder to find. I wouldn't do that. Guys, come on, you know me better than that. But we do have them in store. We have all the 5 wines that you tried. We actually also have, actually, if you can, Brent, if you can just give me just a couple of minutes of your time. We also, we did order a case of the Charme de Lille, the sparkling. We haven't had a chance to taste it because unfortunately sparkling obviously does not behave well in the concept of virtual tasting. We have to take samples home. But could you give us like a quick, just 2-minute idea of what that wine is about?
I can, yes. I'm trying to decide how I want to. So this wine to me, this wine is it's a fun wine. It's a very.
I love fun wine. Let's go.
No, I'm just trying to like figure out how I want to deliver this one. This wine was so easy for me to make that it's almost angers me how good it is. Because all of the other wines that you've tried tonight, there was so much, thought and stress and energy that went into them, right?
Right.
Oh, like I'm like a mad scientist during harvest, running around with beakers and samples. And if no one wants to come and work for me during harvest because I'm a freak in the cellar. I'm just all over the place and change my mind every 2 minutes. And but the charm is just like but the end result, I was like, are you kidding me? Am I wasting all my energy? Because it's so good. It's so efficient and honest. And it's like just exactly what it's supposed to be. It's the quintessential kind of, I think, spirit of what I want wine to be. Like instead of my pet peeve is when someone tries to make a $20 bottle wine look like a $70 bottle wine, and they throw all of these tricks at it, and it comes across as clumsy and awkward and abrasive and not very pleasant. The charm is the opposite. I pulled it back. Let's over deliver on a lesser genre. Let's do Charmat. I don't want to do Method Traditionnel, which then I would have to end up charging $50, $60 a bottle.
Yeah,
because it's aged, it's riddled, and it's hand disgorged and all this. It's Charmat's a very respectable way to make the wine, and then we can only end up charging whatever we charge for it, which I don't know in retail, which is again why Rich is here.
But I can tell you what the retail is. Like, believe it or not, I actually do have wine for sale.
$25?
But no, I'm super interested by this one because
so it's very honest, efficient, refreshing, vibrant. It's like, to me, it's like Vancouver Island in a glass.
Okay, so Vancouver Island in a glass. You heard it straight from the mouth. Vancouver Island in a glass. We do have it as here as well. You guys didn't get a chance to taste it because if I give you sparkling wine in sealed containers that I poured, it's terrible. You don't want it. But if you buy a bottle, it's way better. So you guys would be very happy. That's awesome. Thank you, Brent, because I was trying to I was just thinking I have this wine here that nobody got a chance to try. So it's really great that I can have someone like you who can actually tell people honestly what it's actually like. So I think I've got like, all right, absolute last call for any questions or anything like that. I've got a few people coming through in the chat, but I think they're mostly directed at me. So if I will answer everybody's questions, no problem. But for the record, so we have all 5 wines that Brent has talked about tonight, as well as the sparkling that he just mentioned. We have them in store. There was a card that came with your wine tasting samples. Super straightforward. I hope that everybody took the opportunity and actually put down some notes about what they liked about the wines, because there was space for them there, which is nice, which is lovely. At the bottom of that, there is a link. And that link takes you directly to our online store. In fact, if you use like it's like hashtag 26 at the end, that actually takes you directly to the Averill Creek section. So it's pretty straightforward. And you can order literally all of the wines that we tasted tonight online. We have them all in store. You can pick them up. Okay, you guys know the spiel. We have wine. We love wine. If you would like to buy the wine, we have it here and we would love to give it to you. I'm going to put the link in the chat as well, just to make it super easy for you guys if you would like to jump on there. So you can just copy and paste that link to any browser. It will take you straight to our store, all that fun stuff, all that kind of stuff. What I would like to say is, first of all, thank you to all of you guys who jumped online, sat with us. I mean, like, I'm thanking you guys for drinking wine, which I feel like, I mean, I don't know. Do you guys want thanks for drinking wine, or do you just want to drink wine? I don't know. It's fine. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a lot of fun. I love like occasions like this. But more importantly, thank you to Brent, who jumped online, took the time out of his day to talk to us just about all of these wines that we really enjoyed tasting. There was a lot. I mean, there was just a lot. There was a lot to learn. There was a lot to experience. But at the end of the day, like, let's face it, we all just love wine and we love to drink it and we love to learn about it. So Brent, thank you very, very much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. I hope you've got your camera on and your screen on, because you can see everybody clapping. Everybody's applauding. Everybody's having a really great time. I personally had an awesome time. So from myself and Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciated it. Thank you to Rich as well, who helped. He was kind of the silent party in this chat, but he helped facilitate a lot of this event. So thank you very much, Rich. Really, really appreciate it as well. And I guess thank you to you guys. Like, thanks for jumping online. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for all your questions. It makes it so much nicer when you guys like make it an experience for us. It's a lot of fun. Like, these kind of events are the reasons why we love running these kind of events. There's people like you who love chatting, who love discussing. We get lots of great questions. We get lots of thank yous. Like, mostly everybody's in the chat just blowing up my ego, which I absolutely love. I'm all about that, so just keep them coming. But Brent, Rich, Andrew, is there anything that you guys would like to add, just to wrap it up for tonight?
Yeah, I think the same. I mean, thanks for the very nice thanks. But for me, I just really like sharing these things can seem sometimes contrived, but it's in this forum, it just feels really natural, and it feels really, it's a pleasure for me to kind of just share the journey that I'm going through, because and that's why I might tend to pontificate a little, because I am in my own cellar all the time, so I don't talk to people. So when I get a chance to talk, it's like, ah! So thanks for like listening, and thanks for Rich for not talking, because that's normally his job. He's very good at doing all of that. And thank you. It was very nice to meet you. It was very nice to meet you and chat. That was great. I had a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, you know what? Me too. It's really nice. I love being able to do something like this and give everybody a little bit of experience. I'm not sure if you're reading the chat, Brent, but it's blowing up basically with just big thanks for you, for your insight, for your experience, for your clear and obvious passion in the winemaking area, especially to bring a little bit of information about Vancouver Island, which, I mean, I don't know about. I'm sure everybody else is in a similar vein to me, but I knew nothing about Vancouver Island wine before getting in touch with you guys and starting this discussion. So thank you for that. But I mean, I think we're gonna pretty much wrap it up and call it a day. I'm sure everybody has, maybe they have more wine they would like to enjoy. Hands up. Who's drinking wine after this? Yeah, there we go. All right, next question. Who would like to see another of these wine tastings? There, see, there's more hands. I love it. Awesome. All right, well, one last big thank you to absolutely everybody. We will definitely be having more tastings like this. They're lots of fun. They're clearly something that everybody's really interested in. If you would like to order any of the wines, you can jump on our store. The link is in the chat and also on your tasting notes. Or you can just call or message me on Instagram, or any of that fun stuff. Also, like, keep in touch with the guys at Averill Creek and at Massey Wines. I'll put the links in the chat, just so you guys can have an idea of the people who helped put this event together, because it's really exciting that everybody can sort of come together and create something like this for the people of, well, Vancouver. It's very exciting. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun. I will leave you, I think, unless anybody has anything last minute they want to add, or we can, I think that's it, right? I think everybody's happy just to call it a night and keep drinking wine, right? So we're going to call it a night. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you. Have an excellent night. We really appreciate you coming, and we will see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye,
Winston.
guys. Have a good night.